The sun beat down mercilessly on the Marine Corps training facility in Quantico, Virginia. Lieutenant Sarah Reeves stood motionless in the center of the dusty yard, her petite frame casting a surprisingly long shadow across the packed dirt. At 32, she'd seen more combat than most career soldiers twice her age, though nothing in her calm demeanor betrayed this fact. Her dark hair was pulled back in a regulation bun, and her uniform was impeccable despite the sweltering heat. 4 recruits approached from the barracks, their confident strides and smirking expressions telling a story Sarah had witnessed countless times before. They were the top of their class: Private Jenkins, a former college football star; Corporal Rodriguez, third-generation military with something to prove; Private First Class Williams, a tactical genius with an attitude problem; and Lance Corporal Chen, whose test scores were off the charts, but whose respect for authority left much to be desired. "So this is our new combat instructor," Jenkins said loudly enough for Sarah to hear. "Thought they were sending us someone from Special Operations." "Maybe she's a secretary," Williams added with a snicker. Sarah remained still, her eyes tracking their movement as they formed the loose circle around her. The weight of her service pistol at her hip was familiar and comforting, though she hadn't needed to draw it in anger on American soil, not yet anyway. "Gentlemen," she said finally, her voice quiet but carrying across the yard, "I'm Lieutenant Sarah Reeves. I'll be overseeing your advanced combat training for the next 8 weeks. Rodriguez looked her up and down. "No disrespect, ma'am, but we were promised the best. We've earned it." "Have you?" Sarah asked, her expression neutral. "And what exactly do you think the best looks like, Corporal?" The 4 men exchanged glances, their confidence unwavering. Chen stepped forward, arms crossed over his chest. "Someone who's actually seen combat, for starters. Someone who can teach us something we don't already know." Sarah checked her watch, a battered tactical timepiece that had accompanied her through 3 tours in classified locations. "You have exactly 45 seconds to reconsider your position." "Or what?" Jenkins laughed, moving closer. "You'll write us up?" Sarah said nothing, simply watching the seconds tick by. In the distance, the sound of gunfire from the range punctuated the tense silence. A bead of sweat rolled down William's temple, though whether from the heat or something else was hard to tell. 20 seconds, Sarah announced calmly. "This is ridiculous," Rodriguez muttered, but there was uncertainty in his voice now. The wind shifted, carrying with it the scent of corday and diesel fuel. Sarah remained perfectly still, her breathing measured, her eyes alert. These men had no idea what was coming. They couldn't possibly understand what she'd been through, what she'd done in service to her country. The classified operations alongside Lieutenant Audie Murphy's grandson, the night raids that would never appear in any official record, the scars that no one but her medical officer had ever seen. 10 seconds, she said. The recruits shifted uncomfortably now, their earlier bravado beginning to crack under her unwavering gaze. Something in her eyes, something cold and calculating, had finally registered. 5. Chen uncrossed his arms. 4. Williams took a half step back. 3. Rodriguez strained his posture. 2. Jenkins swallowed hard. 1. The transformation was subtle at first, a slight shift in her stance, a minute change in her breathing pattern, but as the final second ticked away, the woman who stood before them was no longer just Lieutenant Sarah Reeves. She was something else, entirely. The 4 recruits stood frozen as Lieutenant Sarah Reeves moved with lightning precision, her body a blur of controlled violence. In one fluid motion, she disarmed Jenkins, using his own momentum to send him sprawling into the dirt. Rodriguez lunged forward, only to find himself immobilized by a joint lock that brought tears to his eyes. Williams and Chen hesitated, their training kicking in as they circled cautiously, looking for an opening that wasn't there. "A Navy SEAL doesn't announce their presence," Sarah said calmly, releasing Rodriguez with a slight push. "We strike without warning, without mercy, and without ego." The revelation hung in the air like a thunderclap. This woman wasn't just any officer. She was one of the few female operators to ever complete SEAL training, a fact that had been deliberately omitted from their briefing. Now that I have your attention, your real training begins. The following days blurred into a brutal regimen that pushed the recruits beyond anything they had experienced. Sarah drove them relentlessly through mud-soaked obstacle courses, midnight swims in freezing water, and combat scenarios that left them battered and exhausted. She was always there, never showing fatigue, her M4 carbine an extension of her body as she demonstrated marksmanship that bordered on supernatural. "You think you know war," she told them during a rare moment of rest. "You don't. Not yet." On the 7th day, everything changed. What began as a standard field exercise transformed into chaos when live ammunition tore through the trees around them. Williams took a round to the shoulder, crying out as he fell. "Contact, 3 o'clock, Sarah shouted, returning fire with precision. "This isn't part of the exercise." Chen dragged Williams to cover while Rodriguez and Jenkins established a defensive position. Sarah moved like a ghost through the underbrush, her training evident in every calculated step. "Lieutenant, what's happening?" Rodriguez called out, his voice steady despite the fear in his eyes. "We've been compromised," she replied, checking Williams' wound. "Someone knew we'd be here." The implication was clear. There was a traitor either among them or higher up the chain of command. Sarah had made enemies during her classified operations with Colonel Merrill Tengestal, and now those enemies had found her. "Trust no one outside this unit," she instructed, applying a field dressing to William's shoulder. "We move in 5 minutes." As night fell, they navigated through enemy territory, their own training grounds now a deadly maze. Sarah revealed that their training wasn't random. She'd been preparing them for a specific mission, one that had apparently been discovered. "There's a weapons cache," she explained as they took shelter in an abandoned storage bunker. "Experimental technology that could change the face of warfare. My team tracked it here, but someone doesn't want us to find it." Jenkins, who had been the most skeptical, now looked at her with newfound respect. "Why us, Lieutenant? Why these 4 recruits?" Sarah's expression darkened. "Because you were all connected to the last team that tried to recover these weapons, a team that was betrayed and killed, including my partner." The revelation stunned them into silence. Their selection wasn't random. Each had lost someone in that previous mission, a brother, a friend, a mentor. "One of you," Sarah said, checking her weapon methodically, "might unknowingly hold the key to finding the traitor." A distant explosion rocked the bunker, sending dust cascading from the ceiling. Sarah's eyes narrowed as she recognized the signature of the blast. "They're using our own weapons against us," she said grimly, "and they're getting closer." Williams, pale from blood loss but conscious, voiced what they were all thinking. "Lieutenant, are we being set up to die?" Her response was interrupted by the unmistakable sound of a helicopter approaching, not one of theirs. "We've got company," she said, her voice deadly calm. "And now we find out what you're really made of." The abandoned storage bunker shuddered under sustained fire as Lieutenant Sarah Reeves positioned her 4 recruits at strategic points. Williams, despite his injury, manned the southern approach with deadly accuracy. The helicopter searchlights swept across the terrain, hunting them with mechanical precision. "On my mark," Sarah whispered into her comm, "we split into pairs. Rodriguez with Chen, Williams with Jenkins. I'll create a diversion." "That's suicide, Lieutenant!" Rodriguez protested, the respect in his voice unmistakable now. Sarah checked her ammunition. 3 magazines left for her M4 plus her sidearm. "This isn't a democracy, Corporal. This is how we survive." When she gave the signal, chaos erupted. Sarah burst from cover, drawing fire, while her recruits slipped away in pairs. She moved like a phantom through the darkness, her shots finding targets with uncanny precision. For every round fired at her, she returned fire with devastating effect. The 4 recruits, watching from their escape positions, witnessed something few had ever seen. A Navy SEAL in their element, outnumbered but never outmatched. "She's buying us time," Jenkins realized, supporting Williams as they moved toward the extraction point. "She never intended to come with us." The revelation hit them all at once. This had been Sarah's plan from the beginning. She knew the traitor would make a move, and she had positioned herself as bait. Rodriguez made the decision first, turning back toward the firefight. We don't leave our own behind. What followed would later be described in classified reports as one of the most extraordinary displays of coordinated combat by untested recruits in military history. Using the tactics Sarah had drilled into them, they flanked the attacking force, creating confusion in their ranks. Chen spotted him first, a familiar face among the attackers. Major Harrington, their battalion XO, directing the assault with cold efficiency. The traitor revealed at last. "Lieutenant," Chen called through the comm, "Harrington is here. He's leading them." Sarah's voice came back calm amid the gunfire. "I know. I've been waiting for him to show himself." The tide turned when Williams, ignoring his wound, commandeered the enemy helicopter after taking out its pilot with a shot that would have made Sarah proud. The aircraft spotlight now illuminated Harrington's position, exposing him to Sarah's deadly aim. The final confrontation came at dawn. Harrington, cornered and desperate, held a detonator connected to the weapons cache. "You don't understand what you're protecting, Reeves," he snarled. "These weapons would have given us superiority for decades." Sarah's voice was steel. "At what cost? They're biological agents designed to target specific genetic markers. You were selling genocide to the highest bidder." The standoff ended not with Sarah's bullet, but with Jenkins' tackle from behind, a maneuver Sarah had taught him on their very first day. The detonator skittered away as Harrington fell. When the dust settled and the extraction teams arrived, the story became clear. Sarah had been sent to smoke out a traitor while training the next generation of operators who would safeguard the recovered weapons. Her selection of these 4 recruits, each with personal connections to the previous failed mission, had been deliberate, a calculated risk that paid off. 3 months later, they stood at attention before a review board, their uniforms adorned with commendations for valor. Lieutenant Sarah Reeves entered the room, her own chest bearing a new medal, one rarely given in peacetime. "Gentlemen," she addressed the board, "I recommend these 4 for immediate inclusion in Special Operations Group Delta. They've proven themselves not just as soldiers, but as warriors who understand the true meaning of never leave a man behind." Later, as they prepared for their first official mission as a unit, Williams asked the question they'd all been wondering. "Lieutenant, did you know from the beginning that we wouldn't let you face them alone?" Sarah checked her weapon, the same M4 that had seen her through countless operations. Her eyes, usually guarded, softened momentarily. A leader doesn't command loyalty, they inspire it. And sometimes they have to be willing to stand alone to discover who will stand with them. As her transport approached, Sarah shouldered her pack and looked at the team she had forged through fire. "Remember this. When everything else fails, when the mission seems impossible, when the world has given up, that's when Navy SEALs are just getting started."